Let's go to the Big 12 now. Big 12 is in a very interesting spot here. Look at this. Look at this graphic. Just beautiful stuff by the Big 12. Work. Good work, graphic designers. Okay. This tournament is seen within college basketball circles as one that will just be an absolute bloodbath. It is going to be competitive every single game that is played. From a draft perspective, none of those first round games are all that compelling. It's the quarterfinals where we're going to start to get some interesting games. Now, the one that immediately stands out to me is Baylor against Iowa State.
Yep.
And the reason for that is not that Iowa State has a lot of prospects. It's that they are a very good defensive team that can at least pose some very real problems for Baylor and Keyonte George. Iowa State this season is, I'm pulling up the numbers as we speak, 7th in adjusted defensive efficiency right now. They did just beat Baylor over the weekend on Saturday on the road, by the way. Really good game from Jaron Holmes, a bigger 6'4" guard that can actually physically match up with Keyonte George. Keyonte George had a lot of problems in this game against Iowa State, in large part because guys like Osun Osuniyi, Robert Jones, these guys really do a good job protecting the rim. Hassan Ward is another guy as well that I've talked about on the show previously. Good rim protector there. Seeing how Keyonte George actually processes what happened on Saturday and tries to figure out a plan of attack against this defense. You get them 2 times in a row. How does he go about trying to attack the Iowa State Cyclones? How does he go about learning from what happened on Saturday, where he had 7 points on 3 of 10 from the field and went 1 for 7 from 3?
Yep.
How does he adjust his game to try and be able to beat that Iowa State team is going to be a fascinating situation to track throughout that game.
Well, and this is very similar to the G.G. Jackson versus Tennessee situation, because I didn't think Keyonte was very good against Iowa State the first time that they played them in the regular season. It was one of his worst, most inefficient performances. He had a ton of turnovers, I think 5 or 6, picked up a couple charges early. The pressure that Iowa State put on him on the perimeter really bothered Keyonte. I've noticed one of the things about him this year, and go NBA fans who are just tuning in for the first time around this period and reading mock drafts, seeing guys. Keyonte George has been a little bit polarizing as to whether he's, higher end of the lottery or back end of the lottery as a prospect. But one of the challenges that he's faced all year is he struggles with teams that really pressure him on the defensive end of the floor. And I look at this bracket for Baylor. First matchup is against Iowa State, one of the best defensive units in the entire country, who relentlessly presses you, hard hedges, ball screens, loves to get into the basketball. They've got a bunch of athletic wings. Like Gabe Coucher was not a guy that you mentioned up there. He did a pretty good job on Keyonte in their first matchup. Let's say Baylor wins that one. They're getting one of 3 relentless defensive teams in the next round. Kansas, who had a major comeback against Baylor earlier this month with the way that they started really, again, pressuring the perimeter and getting into the basketball with guys like Keyonte. And then West Virginia and Texas Tech, if one of them could pull off a monumental upset against Kansas, those are pressuring defenses that are long and aggressive and get into you as well. Like, this is going to be a really tough road for Baylor in this tournament. But like you said, if we're framing this from an NBA draft perspective, it's going to reveal a lot about Keyonte George and how he can handle aggressive defenses that really come for him.
And speaking of handling aggressive defenses that will come for you, West Virginia and Texas Tech, 2 schemes that will come for Gradey Dick in that second game there as well for Kansas. We'll say, like, Jalen Tyson, physical guy that could cause Gradey Dick some issues. West Virginia, another team that, they do tend to be more of a ball pressure team, but guys like Emmett Matthews, even Eric Stevenson, 6'4", they often have him play up the lineup a little bit more. It's very, very possible that Gradey Dick ends up in a circumstance where he has someone just completely like shadowing him all the time in this matchup and is forced to try and manage that, is forced to try and deal with that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
in a game like this, just to kind of run through what Kansas did against West Virginia this season. In their first matchup, Gradey Dick made 4 threes, had 4 free throws, 5 assists. He was the best player on the court statistically, at the very least, in this game, according to KenPom. And then in the second game against Kansas this season, it was much tighter. I think that was actually last week, if I remember correctly. Gradey Dick again ended up with 16 points, but did turn it over 4 times. And it was a little bit of a tighter struggle throughout the course of that matchup. So I'm really intrigued to see Gradey Dick. I'm also really intrigued to see Jalen Wilson and Kevin McCullough. Kevin McCullough is a guy that has really stood out over the course of the back half of the Kansas schedule in the Big 12 as a player that could stand out for teams looking for a great defender with some ball skills, with some real defensive abilities in terms of switchability, physical point of attack defense, everything that comes with it.
Yeah, Kansas just Gradey Dick's coming off of a rough game, probably one of his worst outings of the season this weekend against Texas, who revealed a lot about how you can pressure and throw different length and athleticism against him. So we'll see if one of West Virginia or Texas Tech are able to replicate that in that second round matchup against Kansas.
Yeah, and look, we're going to get a weird matchup with Kansas State and TCU here. I don't really see any first round picks in that matchup. We're looking at a situation where Emmanuel Miller is really going to be key in that game. A great defensive player that's actually in my top 100 now. I know that Spins will love to hear that.
Love it.
Really, really interesting defensive player, Leonard Miller's older brother, who is a 4th-year college player. Really, really intrigued to see how that matchup goes. TCU beat Kansas State in January. Emmanuel Miller had 23 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists in that game. And then in the second game that they played, it looks like Kansas State actually got them back and blew them out in a matchup where Marquise Noel ended up with 18 and 7. So, Mike Miles did not play in that game against Kansas State the first time. Mike Miles will play in this game. So I don't know that it's worth diving into that all that much, but Mike Miles, another really interesting prospect. Keyonte Johnson, a player that if you don't look into anything else but on-court impact, certainly a player that will be on draft boards if you're not doing that research. Anything else for you on the Big 12? Is there the matchup we're hoping for is Kansas against Baylor in the semifinals?
Yeah, Kansas Baylor would be a ton of fun. Again, if we're framing this from NBA draft standpoints, 2 kind of lottery guys that really stand out: Keyonte George at Baylor, Gradey Dick at Kansas. Would love to see that collision in the semifinals. I think that Texas is a really tough defensive team to try to get past, and TCU, just an experienced, savvy group that knows how to win games. I like both of them as teams heading into March here. But as we said, like Gradey Dick, Keyonte George coming off of some tough performances here to close out the regular season, going to be key for scouts to see how they respond.